I was born in a small town and probably would have died there, ending my life in the prime of life from drunkenness, like many locals, if it hadn't been for my childhood friend, Kot, that is, Caustic. At the age of 13, he visited a big city with his parents for the first time and became sick of it. While the kids dreamed of mysterious islands and treasures, he raved about a noisy anthill that had everything he thought he needed to be happy. After school, he persuaded me to try a different life, and we left for the capital. At first it was hard. Dormitories, part-time jobs, studies, and then it went like a rolling road. The first good earnings, the two of us organized a business. I got married soon, but Kot still couldn't get married. Girls followed him in droves, but to the knight, which he very successfully portrayed, attached heavy character, jealousy, and the principle of if you love. So the queen all joked that if he married only Sharon Stone. In general, life got better. I even moved my family closer to me, but Kostya didn't have time. The old people died. He went to bury them and disappeared. Kot came back 3 months later, gaunt and tired. He offered to buy out his share in the business. He said he wanted to go home. I was amazed. He could call Moscow his home, but certainly not that backwater from which we had once miraculously escaped. He called it Ust, Zazhopinskoye, with undisguised hatred in his voice, and insisted that it was his parents who came to visit him, as long as he didn't go there himself, and who, being in his right mind, would go from the capital to a miserable town, living with the only factory that had been obsolete since the time of Tsar Gorov and was about to be closed. He also says I don't get enough sleep in Moscow, but there the air is fresh. I've slept well over the years, and he himself has such bags under his eyes. I tried to talk some sense into him, at least to persuade him not to sell the place and not to check out, but he did not listen to reason. Threatened me, hissed at me, not to interfere in his life. I fought and fought with his sudden delirium and gave up. To hell with it. He wants to ruin his life. Go ahead. I bought out his share, and we had a terrible fight in the end. 3 months later, he calls, as if nothing had happened, invites me to the wedding. I, of course, agreed. I finally had a logical explanation for leaving, only that such a rational, cold-blooded, and intelligent man so lost his head because of a woman. I don't know. Even if he did dig up Sharon Stone in the backwoods, and how damn right that digging up was. Pale, not ugly, but gray and inconspicuous, with liquid hair and a ponytail, overweight, short, afraid of everyone, speaks quietly, and mostly nonsense. Even less intelligent than beautiful, almost Sharon Stone. Yeah, and next to Kat, tall, charming, pleasant on the face, athletic build, always stylishly dressed, well-read and fond of history and archaeology. I was shocked, although I had one thought. Well, was it a one-night stand? I approached him at the wedding while he was smoking on the back porch of a shabby restaurant. No, you wouldn't believe it. Kat looked up at me with a tired, wan expression. I just can't do it without her. I know it sounds awful. I'm uncomfortable without her, almost to the point of physical pain. I guess it's not love. I don't know what it is, but sometimes you just have to resist fate. The answer was more than strange, but I couldn't get anything more out of him. During the days I'd been their guest, he'd talked about everything but his wife. He shared his plans to renovate his parents' house, invited me to visit in the summer, and yes, now we called back. He was clearly happy to ask me for news, interested in the affairs of the firm, but when I asked him to come back, at least for a while, He answered with a categorical no, more and more often called for a vacation. And at the end of June, he persuaded me to go. Things were getting worse since his departure. Dusty Moscow was pressing hot asphalt. To go to nature seemed such a good idea, especially since his wife and children had gone to her parents at the sea. Since that last meeting 6 months later, my friend looked clearly better, again, smiling, satisfied, except that he did not rumble like a real cat. The flimsy hut of his parents turned into a 2-story solid cottage. When did he have time? The house, it must be said, stood at the very edge of the city. Beyond our street, there was only a sharp slope down to the river and fields. Nobody ever built anything there. The soil was bad. We used to play down there when we were kids. It was deserted and creepy. People often drowned on that part of the river. Adults explained it by underground springs with icy water. A person fell into the water flow from the underground spring and his legs cramped up. And in winter, everything was clear, thin ice. Everyone knew that the place was bad for bathing, but the river took 5, 6 people a year. Among children, there were stupid stories about evil ghosts dragging people to the bottom. The reason for the stories was good. On that bank, there were black remains of a burnt village. Evil ghosts from the village and the Devil's Stone were almost landmarks in our countryside. Our feet brought us to the ladder on our first outing. We just walked wherever we could and chatted. The Devil's Stone is a huge boulder on the riverbank with incomprehensible signs carved on it. There were a lot of stories about it, mostly about pagan rituals, and probably they were not far from the truth. Several times we found on it dissected small animals and bird feathers. I don't know if it was a sacrifice, or maybe someone just wanted to scare children away from a dangerous place. They said that, in exchange for something expensive, the stone could grant a wish. Nobody believed it, of course. I remember from childhood how Lenka, my classmate, buried her favorite doll nearby, crying and asking her parents to stop drinking. It didn't come true, of course. Strange thing, by the way. I thought that in time, under its monstrous weight, the stone will go into the sand at least a quarter of the EI. Sitting on a high cliff, I complained to Kat about how badly things were going, asked him to come back again. He looked at the water in silence, and then a bad thought struck me. I stood up and, putting both hands on the boulder, loudly asked the universe for money to solve my problems. A lot of it. Fast, and that nothing would be done to me for it. The cat was amused. He said he would think about it since I had already decided to ask the devil for money. In the evening, sitting at home, plum wine, he offered to help me with his savings, but my affairs were not so bad as to gut my friend's accounts, especially as there was no work in this hole. He supposed, apparently, to live on them, and I had a lingering hope that he would return to the capital. And suddenly, I felt proud. Couldn't I do anything without him? I looked around the kitchen in search of a new topic of conversation, noting that it lacked a woman's hand. Everything was neat and tidy. Kat was very meticulous about it, but it lacked something soulful and cozy. Some embroidery, for example, and there were no feminine things in the bathroom. I cautiously inquired, "How long have you and Svetka been separated?" "No, I didn't. She drowned in early May." The cat opened the window and came back to the table and smoked. It was a rare sight. He'd never smoked indoors in my memory. We've lived here before. Had an argument in the evening. She ran out into the street in hysterics. I followed her. I thought I'd come to my senses and make up, but it was so foggy. I kept coming back to the house. In the morning downstream, he was quiet, and reached into the nightstand for another bottle. She was found, a fool, to soothe her nerves at night by bathing in cold water. I see her sometimes, though. I got a chill. He said it in his normal, everyday voice, like he was asking what time it was. I grinned and moved the bottle away from him. The cat appreciated the joke, laughed, and, lighting another cigarette, headed for the porch. The fog was thickening. Here in the lowlands, it was a frequent guest. That's where I see Svetka. She seems to be standing there, calling, and then she goes down to the river. Believe it or not, I've wanted to leave 100 times, at least to the city center, but I keep waiting for that stupid fog in the evenings. If only I'd found her then. There, see? He waved his hand frantically toward the river, but I couldn't see anything. It was just a blur. And then the cat broke out of his seat and started to go there, not himself, and I barely had time to grab him and drag him almost by force into the house. Under the bright light of the kitchen chandelier, he seemed to come to his senses, apologized, and went to bed. A week and a half passed, almost imperceptibly. A comfortable house, nature, fresh air, healthy food, and Kota was a mass. Entertainer. In general, I didn't want to return to Moscow, but I had to, and it would have been better not to return, but to get lost somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Everything was going wrong. Everything was falling apart, no matter what I took on. And my youngest daughter became seriously ill. Literally within a month, his whole life collapsed into debt. Creditors began to threaten. My wife was afraid to leave the house. He decided to sell the apartment. And then I got the news of Kat's death. I sat by the phone with a dumb expression and listened to something about inheritance. Will, I could not even imagine that it would ever happen. He was more family to me than all my relatives combined. I don't remember driving there. Straight to the cemetery. His wife's relatives even buried him. I found out too late. Talked to him about something. And, God, even standing at his grave. I desperately didn't want to believe it. It was all a blur. It turned out that he left me a house and a 2-room apartment in the city center. I didn't even know about the latter. I guess he really wanted to get away from his hazy visions. I went to his house. It was getting dark. So I went straight to bed. In the night, I woke up to a strange noise downstairs. I thought that thieves had gotten into the officially empty house. I was rather surprised that no one had gotten in yet. I grabbed the steel rod used to fix the curtains and went to the first floor. But no, there was no one there. It was just a dream, or maybe it was just a dream. As soon as I relaxed and put my foot on the stairs of the second floor, there was a ringing in the kitchen. I rushed in. I turned on the light and was stunned. There was Kat, sitting at the table. Not a zombie, not a corpse, but my friend, real and as alive. Only a little pale. He smiled, made a gesture inviting me to sit down. I didn't sit down. I just collapsed on the chair, clutching the steel bar with a dead grip. Like the last straw that kept me either from fainting or from insanity. A cat, alive. Did they mix it up? Did they bury someone wrong? Or is there a ghost in my kitchen? I thought about it, and then I stopped. It's me in his kitchen, not the other way around. And it's as if he heard my thoughts and smiled more than ever. And he says quietly, Well, is the house and the apartment enough for your debts? Or did you have to write off the car? His voice, his intonation, but so empty. Here, he smiles with his lips and eyes, but his voice is empty, colorless. He poured me a glass of his homemade wine, smiling, and I thought I would go crazy. I drank the glass in one gulp and clung to my rod again. The cat reached for the newspaper, tore off a piece of paper, wrote something, and put it in front of me. I read, "Run," and I woke up in a cold sweat. I was shivering. It's 3 in the morning. The usual fog outside the window. Just a dream. After calming myself down, I went to the kitchen for a drink of water. At the entrance, I stumble. There it is, my saving steel rod. I turn on the light. There's an empty bottle on the table and a glass with the bottom upside down. There's something under the glass. That's right, a piece of newspaper with Rune written on it. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, in my car, frantically clutching the metal icon of Nicholas the Wonderworker, previously glued to the front panel. I had dreamed, lunated. I persuaded myself to get out, went to the house. Or was it not a dream? There he is, in the fog, waving, calling, a cat. I don't know what I was thinking, or if I was thinking at all, but I followed him. I walked. It seems to me that the devil drove me forever, spinning me in circles, laughing with the voice of a friend calling me. It was like I knew it wasn't Cat, but I was so desperate, as if I caught the ghost, I could get my friend back. I believed it or something. And I'd never believed in anything more than I believed in that blatant, mystical nonsense. It was very cold, but I didn't feel it until someone yanked me backwards. As it turned out, I was already standing almost waist deep in the icy water, near the Devil's Stone, and some old man was pulling me by the hand. It was a happy accident. A neighbor saw me running to the river and followed me. I told him everything. I thought he was going to call the paramedics, but he just shook his head. He said that a lot of fools go to the stone, and then they catch them, or their relatives. The most precious things, he said, are taken away. He said Kot was knowledgeable, not of our type. Listen to Kot. I looked at him dumbfounded. How could I listen to him when he was dead? Grandfather only waved his hands. He said it was a pity. His grandmother was a fool. Just like you. I warmed up and went to the cemetery. I don't know what I expected to see there. An open grave, another ghost. From the monument looks the cat next to the grave of his wife, a colorless mouse to whom no one would never pay attention if it were not for her cherished wish, begged in the right place. But only devils on a tray cannot bring love, no matter how much you wish, but quickly take their own. Yesterday, I would never have believed in such nonsense. But now this explanation of his departure was almost the only and most logical one. I sold the inheritance, of course. It saved my skin, but I still often dream that I'm looking for my friend in the fog, that he's right next to me, but he's always slipping away, and I dream of that laugh. And this, do you have enough for the debt? I'm afraid to go into the kitchen at night. He's there sometimes, smiling, advising. Always right, but how afraid of him I am, and afraid of myself. How hard it is to live with this guilt, which presses on my chest with all the weight of the damn stone. How scary it is to fall asleep when these terrible nightmares await me, when the damn fog beckons.